It's Friday. Ryan made it. So did I. I didn't make Friday. I just made it here. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Very excited to get your feedback this week. A lot of fun. So, yeah. John McKee doing the roll call. Of course, there's John here. John, are you saying that you got your vaccine? Are you saying you're vaccinated now? Matthew, Bill, Brian, Hank, Frank, Deborah, Roger, Andrew, Rick, Eugene, Webb, Donna, and Ryan, all ready for action. Let's play the feud. I know I reference Family Feud a lot. Oh, cool. John got part 1 of the vaccine. Listen, if you turn into a werewolf, let us know, okay? Sorry. I have a family member who's not going to get the vaccine. You know why? Because that's how they chip you. You know how he knows? He saw it on Facebook. They don't need to chip you if you're checking into Facebook every 5 minutes and carrying a smartphone in your pocket. I'm glad for you, John. I'm glad you got the vaccine. It was really some exciting news yesterday, like outside of the Apple sphere. And I know, like, what's the chance I'm listening to that? But what was it? They're hoping to have enough vaccine to be able to vaccinate the country by the end of July. I don't want to talk politics. The last administration was excited because they got a vaccine. They were able to prod a vaccine into existence. And you know what? If there is anything good to say about the last administration, it might be that. I would have to study and find out who and all that stuff. And I know that there were scientists working on it before that, but the whole warp speed thing was aspirational. But, you know, having a working, it's like we talk about with Apple Car. If Apple designs a car, great. I'm going to need 1 million of them, right? Anyway, it's kind of exciting. I didn't read a lot of real news today, but I saw things that gave me hope, like about how much vaccine there might be, and the fact that you've got grown-ups in the room now talking about how we could possibly open schools again in a real way, in a safe way, as opposed to just, standing up there saying we need to get back to school. Well, nobody disagrees with that, but can we do it safely? Anyway, I'm glad for you, John. That's my whole point. I'm glad for you. And I kind of look forward to getting mine as well, although I saw a video of it and I hate needles. I hate them, but I'll do it. I'm going to wait 8 years until it's inhalable and just never go anywhere. I'll get the shot when I can. Right. Let's do a show. What do you say? Okay. Feedback and feedback on feedback. It is Friday, the 12th of February, 2021, and this is macOS Ken Live. I say February, and yet I just said 12th. Hi, everybody. Ken Ray. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of macOS Ken Live. An edition of macOS Ken Live driven almost entirely by listeners. Second half of the show, I'm going to respond to people's responses. That is the feedback on feedback part. You know what that means? It means the first part of the show, we got to do the feedback. And there was a decent amount of it. So it was 1 week ago today on this show that I jokingly said, we all knew that we were coming towards Apple making a Snoopy show because it was 1 week ago that premiered. And it started me thinking about how much has happened over the past 15 years that we couldn't have seen coming. And of course, that got me wondering, okay, so what are some of the things that have really wowed us? What are some of the things that surprised us? And what are some of the things that we want to see Apple do over the next 15 years? 15, by the way, the reason for that is because macOS Ken is now 15 years old. And so I was thinking, about the things that have happened just in the time that I've been doing daily Apple news or news related to Apple news. Although I guess I could have gone 16 because I was doing that for Inside Mac. But anyway, that's all whatever. I was thinking about those questions. I was also thinking about those questions on another show that I do called In a Few Minutes, put those questions to a few people, and then finally I put the questions to people right here on macOS Ken Live. I said, please write to me, and people did not disappoint. Well, I mean, some people didn't write to me, so I guess they didn't disappoint either. They just, didn't write in. It's fine. You know, we've all got stuff, but some people wrote in, and we'll talk about those right now. Let's start with Brian M. Brian M. opted for no surprise. He just went with the wow and the future. The wow, we're at a point where Moore's Law is ending, and just in the nick of time, Apple Silicon, the system on a chip and system in package, along with integrated graphics and memory handling of the M1, will remove the constraints of using third-party chips like those from Intel, who has stumbled in recent years. You're going to hear me reference episodes of In a Few Minutes from this week, because while there's a tiny bit of repetition to some of the things that people sent in, and there was a tiny bit of repetition on that show, it's interesting how many different topics people have found. But we'll talk about that more later. Mike Rose, who was on Friday's edition of In a Few Minutes, and you can find In a Few Minutes right here on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ken Ray, or you can just download the podcast. It's called In a Few Minutes. Search for Ken Ray wherever you get podcasts. You can find that. Friday's edition, Mike Rose actually talked about this. And what's interesting is when I started doing Apple stuff, almost 16 years ago now with Inside Mac, one of the first events I went to was the one where Steve Jobs said, hey, we're moving to Intel. So to me, this is just a thing that happens. Because when I came in, they were like, right, we're moving. I was like, oh, okay, so we're moving. It's a bigger deal, I think, than I realized at the time. And I'm excited to see what happens with the M1 as well, or the whole M series, or is it going to be the M series, or what's it going to be? Heck, just from a marketing standpoint, I'm excited about that, but that's the kind of nerd I am. As far as the future is concerned, Brian M., and I keep stressing that because there are two Brians who wrote in this week. As far as the future is concerned, Brian M. says, I hope Apple will build on their already solid business brand reputation and set the bar higher for corporate America. As we focus more on environment, social, and governance to measure business success, Apple can literally change lives and the planet by their management choices and decisions beyond the change that will be driven by Apple's technology innovation. Yeah, you really want to listen to the episode of In a Few Minutes this week with Mike Rose, because you guys are thinking along sort of similar lines. I can play devil's advocate for just a second and say I could see other companies saying, well, sure, it's easy for Apple because they're the most valuable company on the planet. They can afford to plant forests that they cut down and replant so that they do the paper thing. They can afford to go with the sustainable energy and things like that. They can afford those initiatives. And it's true, they can. They would argue that what we really can't afford is to not do those things. And they'll lead by example. And who knows what else they have up their sleeve as far as that's concerned. But I'm with you, Brian M. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Paul wrote in, what has surprised him when it comes to Apple is how the introduction of the iPhone would change the industry, right? Look for a phone with a physical keyboard. I would imagine there are a couple out there, but I would imagine there are only a couple. Shelley Brisbane actually talked about this. It's really funny because when I first thought about doing that for a topic or for a list of topics for In a Few Minutes this week, the question I had for myself is, what do I do when the third person says iPhone? And it turns out only one person said iPhone as far as the In a Few Minutes guests. And I think Paul may be the only person who wrote in and mentioned iPhone as well. I wonder if people think, well, that was 16 years ago, because it wasn't. iPhone is not forever. I mean, it's starting to be like a long time ago now. But 14 years ago, the only people who had an iPhone were people who worked inside Apple in some secret lab. We didn't get that until the summer of 2007. It was announced in January of 2007. Hasn't even been 14 years. It's not even old enough for its learner's permit, for crying out loud. In the wow category, Paul says, when it comes to Apple, what has wowed me is their patience. Unlike Microsoft, they develop technology or product, and instead of pushing it out immediately to show off a new shiny thing that they have, they look at it and plan how and when they can introduce that, and in some cases, introduce intermediate technologies or products to slowly work towards that technology or product that they created many years before. Isn't that what happened with the iPhone? Am I misremembering that? Didn't the iPhone actually kind of grow out of what they were doing with iPad? I'd have to go back and check, but that is an interesting thing. Now, I know you're talking about hardware, but man alive, that story on today's macOS Ken from the co-founder of Netflix, I guess what Apple could have done was secretly made movies for 15 years, right? Secretly made movies and TV shows for 15 years and then hit with a whole ton of content. Whether you agree or disagree, and this again goes to a conversation that I had with Shelley Brisbane on her edition of In a Few Minutes this week. Whether you agree or disagree with the idea that they should have launched with legacy content, that they should have bought somebody's back catalog, which I honestly thought they might do towards the end of the summer last year. Not that I thought that that's when they would buy it, but I thought, okay, so we're not recovering from COVID-19 as quickly as we would like. Production is not going to be as robust anytime soon as it might have been. Maybe Apple should go ahead and do that. For whatever reason, they've decided not to do that. The Netflix guy is saying, man, if they want to succeed, they need to get into it. They need to jump in with both feet, he said. What's your hurry? Because Apple's not in a hurry on this. They built a movie studio. They built a television studio. They're signing deals that are years and years out. Check back in a few years, I think is what I said on today's macOS Ken. As far as the next few years, Paul says, I see Apple introducing more services and products that focus on an integrated solution for security and privacy, like creating a Tor-like service that will obfuscate people's location, possibly supporting additional Tor nodes for the current network, integrating support for Tor into the whole OS product line. Another thing I see Apple producing is a personal assistant like Siri that runs on a device, but it has access to your personal data. And since it runs locally, none of the information is shared outside of the device. I see this as a single device that will communicate with others, not just integrated with all of Apple's devices. So Dave Hamilton and I actually talked about something similar to this on this week's In a Few Minutes. The thing is, I don't remember if we talked about it during the show or after the show. He talked a lot about ambient computing and having that plus machine learning really integrate Apple into our daily existence, and not like a, hey, I've got this new device that's really cool, but just you wake up and you're in it. It's what I used to call sort of like walking through your technology in a way. So after the show, I know we definitely started talking about the possibility of personality for these devices or for this device. The thing that I wonder about though is that a personality that exists for me in that whole ecosystem? I've had Iron Man in my head all day to the point that I actually had to listen to a little AC/DC. Think about the way Tony Stark works, right? He can always talk to Friday, or he can always talk to Jarvis before that. But Jarvis isn't everywhere. Jarvis is always like there to talk to him, but then he's got that one stupid robot. And by the way, I'm talking about the movies. Sorry, I don't know enough about the the comics to be able to talk about how much of that's accurate as far as the comics are concerned. The point is he's got like a bunch of robots around and they have individual personalities. And then there's this overriding thing that is Jarvis that he's able to sort of reference. Would my phone have a different personality than my iPad, have a different personality than my computer? Or does the HomePod hear everything and sort of distribute that personality, but only in my local stuff? In other words, the personality of whatever it is that I've got isn't running on one of Apple's servers. It's running locally, but is it distributed among all my devices, or does my iPad have a different attitude than my phone? That's kind of a fun, almost science fiction thing to think about. Well, I say almost science fiction. It was in Iron Man 2 or Iron Man and Iron Man also. Anyway, I really appreciate your thoughts there, Paul. Frank wrote in, he said, what's wowed him? The iPhone made us realize anything you can dream can be created. During a rehab stint, I kept writing reviews, testing software, gathering graphics, creating layouts, and submitting articles from my rehab bed on my iPhone alone. I hate when I forget to be wowed by that because that is amazing. I think I mentioned on this show like a week or two ago. I was sitting at the table. It occurred to me that I wanted to print something out, make some list for some show that I was doing. And I picked up my iPhone and I did it. And I could hear the printer going off upstairs. And that's mind blowing that Frank was able to do all that stuff from his rehab bed. It becomes so regular that we forget how amazing it is. I mean, I know I've asked the question before, how do you know you're living in the future? Because you're living in the future. The problem is it's the now, and we want it to be that much better. But man alive, I used to have to go to Kinko's to get stuff printed, and Kinko's doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, as far as the surprise, where are we? Oh, that's right. Frank's too cool. I forgot. As far as the surprise, nothing Apple does surprises me anymore. I always expect them to pull a rabbit out of their hat. As Steve said, we make things you didn't know you needed. Frank's too cool to be surprised. And finally, for the next 15 years, Frank's excited to figure out what LiDAR was so important for. Yeah, I'm with you. Although I'm really thinking it's the AR thing now. VR, AR, maybe other stuff. I mean, the cars as well. It's going to be a technology. I don't mean to make it sound like all like, we know, but I'm kind of excited to find that out too, Frank. Brian F. wrote in. See, I told you there were two Brians. What has wowed him? What's wowed him is how 15 years ago in 2006, just about all of Apple's revenue we talk about today wasn't even part of the company. iPhone, iPad, lots of services. It truly wows me not only to see how much the company grew, but how they created an Apple ecosystem, much of it self-driven. By that I mean in 2006, one of the only places I could go to buy a Mac was CompUSA, which was already closing stores. So Apple, seeing the handwriting on the wall, started offering their own retail stores. It's this vertical integration, or these vertical integration ideas that really wowed me looking back at the last 15 years. Yeah, the one drag is how that ended up, tanking a lot of independent resellers. But I get what you're saying. Of course, now you can go to Best Buy, which sometimes is okay. What's interesting is Andy actually put something similar to what's wowed Brian is the surprise. What has surprised me in the last 15 years, all the new sectors Apple has entered. Finance, you got Apple Pay, Apple Card, and installment programs for hardware. Entertainment, Apple TV Plus and Apple Arcade. And health, Fitness Plus, health initiatives in the Apple Watch Health Focus. They've greatly expanded from their original Apple Computer, Inc. Going back to Brian really quickly, what has surprised him was over the past 15 years, Apple's willingness to switch the processors in their computers, not once, but twice. See also the Mike Rose Show, Friday's edition of In a Few Minutes. It's so funny because that's where I came in. As far as 15 years from now, Brian says, in 15 years, I would expect Apple to continue to push health efforts, environmental sustainability, privacy, etc. This may look like local data that you can quantifiably use for goal setting, seeking professional medical help, doubling efforts to recycle old Apple products, and possibly Apple buying a VPN company or starting its own ISP. Another thought with regards to the Apple Car talk is a paradigm shift on how we think about our relationship with cars. I think Apple will really double down its efforts in major populated areas first, like it did with the Street View maps, to have a ride-sharing program arguing how many less tons of carbon and et cetera are on the streets. The Micros Show. You want to listen to that one in a few minutes. Tell your friends. Eugene wrote in, what wowed me about Apple in the last 15 years? Little things. That they could conceive of and implement an ECG on a watch. Portrait mode on iPhone cameras was just wow the first time I tried it. When they announced the Secure Enclave, that wowed me because I'm a nerd. I still giggle when my Mac unlocks with my watch. That wowed me even more than when they put Touch ID on the Mac. And the first time I tried encoding video on an M1 Mac, wowed me as well. If there is anything that has surprised Eugene, he says it's the same thing that got him to be a switcher in the first place. Surprise is the feeling I get when I get hold of a new Apple product and use it. And, surprise. Somebody actually thought about the usability and the workflow and how people actually do things instead of what features can we bolt on. Can't name any specifics, but I've gotten that pleasant surprise with my Mac, my iPhone, my iPad, my Apple Watch. Perhaps I shouldn't be surprised, but I regularly am. No, keep that. Keep that sense of surprise, I say. On the flip side, I'm still regularly surprised how janky iCloud services can be. Yeah, that ties back to what Frank was saying before. You could do real work with it, and it saved me in more than one pinch, and yet it can be amazingly kludgy. It's so funny because Apple says it just works. So when it doesn't just work the way you expect it to, then you're like, it's just crap. It's not. It's still amazing. Maybe it's just not done. As far as the next 15 years, he says, I'm with you on Apple getting into the healthcare arena. Before I retired, I was very peripherally involved in things that dealt with health records. It's a terrifying mire. I absolutely agree with that. Health records are incredibly important for somebody to get their proper treatment, yet they are not portable, not really standardized, not accessible, and their contents could be incredibly damaging to someone's life if stolen or exposed. Apple hasn't really got a horse in that game. They're not health, they're not insurance, they're not tackling the problems from a commercial end of the medical business. They are in a position to look at this and tackle this from the human side. And yes, I'm putting a lot of faith in Apple, but they've certainly earned some of that trust. I'm really excited about the possibility of health records. That's the thing that Apple, I know they've rolled it out to the VA. I don't know how it's being adopted other places, but I've told the story here before of having a relative who was kind of a frequent flyer. He would go from doctor to doctor, and first of all, he was gaming. He was trying to get other medication from other doctors because he was a pill shopper. It's what he did. But the other thing was he was in the hospital enough that they just knew his record. And so one time he went to the hospital and they just pulled his old record and started giving him meds that he had before. And he got worse because the assisted living facility where he lived and the doctors there had changed his medication. So when he came into the hospital, they just pulled the old record, started giving him what they'd been giving him like 3 weeks before. He starts tanking. They don't know why. And then finally somebody looks at the stack of papers that was brought with him when he came in. If you got in the habit of scan whatever app, run whatever QR code, whatever, make sure that the information that you have is updated instead of relying on paper records or even computer records that have to be entered by somebody. That's been something I've wanted for a very, very long time. And I'll keep banging that drum. He goes on to say, of course, this idea can be extended to any form of data that should belong to the individual, not the corporations they do business with. Also, for Apple TV and maybe Apple News, they should get into long-form journalism. They like uplifting, informative shows and documentaries. I'm sorry, they like uplifting, informative shows, and documentaries. I think there's an opportunity there for well-researched, factual, current events information. Maybe not the nightly news by Apple, but something along those lines. Andy, we talked about Andy earlier, what he was wowed by in the last 15 years, the iPhone and its impact on the world. That is only the second time that's come up in this list, which is incredible. It shows you we'll do feedback on feedback in a bit. Also, Shelley Brisbane in a few minutes. That was that episode. His surprises were or was the new markets into which Apple entered. We talked about those earlier. As far as what he sees for the future, big progress in all things AI, including platforms for AI and AR, Siri, autonomous cars, glasses, robot. This is the toughest question because it's hard to predict the new technologies. Yeah, that's why I didn't ask anybody to predict it, because I know we don't know. I was asking what you were interested in or what you hoped for. So well done, Andy. Matthew just skipped straight to the future. If Apple does go with the future of leasing or renting their tablets or primarily their laptops, I think we've reached the limit on size and shape of what a laptop can be. The only upgrades can be the internals and the display, so why not make a chassis system in which the display panel can be swapped out with a better tech that's cheap enough to include, say, for example, OLED, and have a swappable motherboard that can be taken in for a new, faster, better version. So if you only need to upgrade the display, do it. Motherboard, do that. I would think occasionally the keyboard would be swapped out too. I think the future is still modular or semi-modular and not pitching the whole unit out every 2 years or so. With this in mind, they would have to make the laptop chassis a bit thicker. Yeah, I'm having trouble with this idea. I mean, I get why you would want it, and certainly from a sustainability point of view, I get the argument for it too. I mean, wouldn't it be great if instead of the reason I'm still struggling with the bad keyboard on my computer is because I don't have 24 hours that I can be without my computer. And in hashtag times like these, I don't know for certain. Is that what I said? In hashtag times like these, I don't know how long it would take to get my computer back. And I've got a MacBook Air that I could use, but that scares me to death. So I get it from a quick, like almost hot swappable idea. At the same time, it's just not that elegant. I know that's crazy, but if you're paying to rent your computer from now on, if you're paying to lease your computer from now on, don't you want like something new every year or two? Now, not to keep harping on the whole in a few minutes thing, but Mike Rose was talking about what he would like to see Apple do over the next 15 years is really like triple down on the sustainability thing. What's their robot that takes iPhones apart called? Is it Daisy? Is that what it's called? I know they are working towards trying to make it so that every part of an iPhone is recyclable, so that every part of an iPhone can be turned back into another part of an iPhone or another part of some hardware that they're going to make and sell. Personally, that's how I'd rather see the sustainability thing go, especially if I'm going to rent something. If I'm going to rent a computer, in a couple of years, I want a new computer. I don't think I want, although I do love the stickers on my computer. My computer is covered with stickers on the back or on the front, on the lid. And it will bum me out when I end up trading this in or giving it to somebody else or something like that. But it lacks elegance. And yet, you want it, good for you. I hope you get the future you want and I get the future I want. And that they don't end up fighting. Gary wrote in with a variation on the offered theme. I think what Apple did best in the past 15 years was buying PA Semi. We are still seeing the result of that deal for the past 10 years. Definitely on board with that. That was a question that I asked on In a Few Minutes a very long time ago. What was the most important purchase Apple ever made? And my argument was for PA Semi until somebody said, well, actually, they bought Next, which, of course, gave them not only the heart of Mac OS, but it also got them Steve Jobs back. But that was more than 15 years ago. So over the last 15 years, yes, I am definitely with you on that, Gary. PA Semi was a big thing. I'm not going to say it's the best thing, but you could make a case. For the future, he says, I would like to see what Apple might do for the home. Will it be something like the Tony Stark house? Again, Shelly and I touched on that because she wants automation, but she doesn't want a fully automated house. She wants the level of automation that she wants. And then the part that I'm having trouble figuring out is how do I do that either without totally rewiring my house or having it look like, houses in the movie Brazil. Thankfully, I don't have to figure that out. That's for smarter people than me. or, people whose brains work differently. Anyway, I gotta say, I appreciate all that feedback. That was a tremendous amount of fun for me to read through and go through, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. I want to talk more about the feedback in a moment. What I was going to ask you to do at this middle part was check out in a few minutes, but I think I've done that into the ground. So maybe we don't have to do that. You've probably heard now. We talked about a lot of these things. Um, and I think that's a question that I'm going to keep asking people over the next little while as well. Not for a whole week, obviously, but like I'm talking to Tom Merritt for next week's in a few minutes. We're going to record here in a bit, and I'm going to put that question to him, and kind of curious what his answers will be. So the question lives on for a while. In a few minutes, also goes on and on and on. And thank you very much for listening to that. If you do, or if you have. I think the thing that was neat is just how many like different things people came up with. That everybody didn't say iPhone honestly surprised me. And that was both from the people who were on in a few minutes and from the people who wrote in as well. It's so interesting. It's not quite a Rorschach test, but it's kind of close, right? What do you want to see Apple do in 15 years? I want to see them build a robot. I want to see them save the planet. Cool. I want the AR thing that I want. Can that save the planet? In some ways, maybe. Might save my sanity. Might just be fun. Who knows? Here's the one question that I have. And when I say one question, I mean two. Should we do these questions again, but differently? Not these questions, but should we talk about where Apple has let us down? Should we talk about what Apple could do better? Because I have watched Apple for 15 years because I find them to be a fascinating story. I like the Mac. I like the iPhone, certainly. I'm neck deep in their ecosystem at this point. It's not like they can do no wrong. And is that the kind of thing that we should do as like a show? Is that the kind of thing that we should do for feedback as well? Not the niggling little things like it sucks when iCloud sucks, because we all know it sucks when iCloud sucks. I'm thinking more about, well, I don't want to color that page yet. I'm wondering if that's a thing that we should think about. And honestly, that's largely for me because I don't want to get in a place of ever thinking that Apple can do no wrong. I like a lot of the good stuff that Apple does. I wonder if maybe we should think about that. Maybe we'll think about that. Maybe I'll kick that around. If that's something you want to do, I'm not asking you to answer the question yet because I know the question isn't even there yet. But do we on this show, you and me, want to take a more not criticizing, but more critical look at maybe the things about Apple that we wish they would do better? You can leave a comment on this video and let me know if that is something you would like to do. You can also send me an email, info@macosken.com. You know how we know that works? Because we just talked for about, I don't know, half an hour or so about emails that people sent in. I got to say, they were really interesting to me, and I really appreciate everybody who did play. So thank you very much to the Bryans, to the Andy, to the Frank, to the other people whose names I've already forgotten. Gary, I know Gary was one. Paul, if memory serves. Anyway, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I guess I guess we're at the end. There's no show tomorrow. There's no other show tomorrow. It's the weekend. How's that song go? Yeah, weekend, just what you want to do. Yeah. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Of course, Mac OS Ken does kick off again on Monday. Mac OS Ken Live does as well, but now I'm skipping around to things. In a few minutes, Tom Merritt next week. Always a tremendous amount of fun when he's around. I'm very excited to have him back on. And then, yeah, Monday afternoon, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, we will do Mac OS Ken Live once again. Talk to you soon. I forgot to say, if you're in the chat room, please stay in the chat room, but you guys have been here before, so you know. You know, you know. My eyes aren't getting better, but my glasses aren't working. Are my eyes getting worse and I need even better glasses? If that is the case, boo. All right, what's everybody doing? Remember the interview with Steve Ballmer where he laughed about a $600 phone with no keyboard? No. Do you remember? I remember Ballmer actually getting up at not CES. What's the other one? The thing that happens in January, and basically waved at like a table of tablet prototypes. And, this was after the iPad had been introduced. So it was, I can't remember the name of it. The thing that happens in January. Anyway, he was like, yeah, tablets. We got tablets. We got tablets. That was after they had announced the iPad, like a week after they had announced the iPad, which is hilarious. The other one that I remember about the iPhone was when Rob Enderley, actually suggested that Apple was opening itself up to lawsuits with the iPhone because physical keyboards, kids, while they're driving, were also texting, but they were doing that with physical keyboards because they could just feel, where the buttons were, and so they could send a message just by feel. And since the iPhone had no buttons, but kids were still going to be texting while they were driving, they were going to end up getting in wrecks. And that was going to open Apple up to lawsuits. And that was seriously a thing that he said. Dude. How can you even? And then people still turn to him and they're like, so tell me what you think, Rob Enderley. Really, dude? Really? Not about Apple. Not about Apple. Go talk about something else. Because at that point, your hate's showing. Frank says Siri's been beginning to get personality. Really? Interesting. Curious how, Frank. Eugene says that each individual device should have a different personality. Might be more efficient in different types of tasks. It should all share the same information, though, right? As far as like locally distributed. In other words, if I don't need to say in other words. I want my iPad to know the same stuff that I want my phone to know. But if I want to do something more business-like, maybe I would go to my iPad as opposed to the snarky responses I get from my iPhone. It's all based on Friday. Rob says, Siri is like my dog. She knows what I said, but refuses to comply. I think you're confusing Siri with a cat, but I get what you're saying. Frank Petrie says, never go to Best Buy. Okay. I don't know why, but okay. Computer City. Did Circuit City sell computers? Fry's was a thing in the West. I think they're still around, although I don't know. I went to a Micro Center like a year and a half ago. It was weird because it was like walking into the past, but it was also neat because it was like walking into the past. It was like walking into a less fun Fry's as well. And now I want fries. Damn it. Paul says my wife loves her tech until the point where it doesn't work as she expects and then she hates it. Well, see all of us though, right? I get that way. I think I finally stopped cursing at Siri. But Siri has also gotten better. Or maybe I'm just being trained on how to talk to Siri to know what to expect and not. And now the guys are talking about stores in the areas where they grew up. And I'm not there. I'm sorry. I didn't grow up there. I don't remember what we had as far as computer stores. I want to say that there was one. It doesn't matter because I was about to tell you where it was. And first of all, it's not there anymore. And second, Lion's Head. There, I'll say it. I think there was a computer store in Lion's Head, which I remember when there was no Lion's Head. None of this means anything to anybody. So there you go. If you grew up in Nashville or live in the Nashville area, you know what I'm talking about. It used to be you'd go out and there was a field. Then they were building this like shopping center. It's like, why? Nobody comes out here. Well, it turns out when you build a shopping center, people want to go shopping. Used to be a Polynesian joint and a bowling alley and a swimming pool that I don't think was ever open ever. Oh, Liam. Was Liam first or was Daisy first? Because I think they were both of them, right? I can't remember. I can't remember who was first. Paul says he sees a future where all products need to be pre-ordered so that resources aren't wasted. Interesting. Although there's an immediate gratification thing for a lot of people. I think the stores work partly because people can get their hands on it, but also because people can just walk out with the thing they want. So I would think there would always be some uh, ready to wear. Matt asks, is there any way that season 2 of Ted Lasso can be as good as season 1? Could season 2 let us down? Well, yes, of course, season 2 could let us down, but let's hope it doesn't. The thing that's interesting to me, and I hate it, but it's also good, they've committed to only doing 3 seasons. And I want that show to go on forever, but I also want it to be perfect forever. So I got to trust that they're actually, I don't have to trust. It doesn't matter. If I start watching it and it stinks, I'll stop watching it. But that show just hit on all cylinders. It's hard to imagine it suddenly falling off a cliff. Now, see, there's Frank saying the thing about the 3 seasons. I should read ahead. Comdex? Is that what it's called? Really? All right. That didn't sound right to me. Is that what it is? Matthew says they still have micro centers in Ohio. They're crazy, right? Because it's like walking into the past somehow. Hank says Fry's is an empty shell of itself, and that's before the pandemic. Yeah, what's going on there? Did we ever hear? Because I know somebody was starting to write articles about it, and I believe Harry McCracken was actually posting pictures of mostly empty Fry's stores, and yet they said they were still like a going thing. I used to love that place. John says they still have Fry's in the Bay Area, but it's not a great experience. Frank says Siri will lecture you if you curse at it. Yeah, that's why I quit. Matthew got his first Apple TV one circuit. Your first Apple TV, was it the hockey puck size or was it the thing that was about the size of a Mac Mini? It says he got his first Apple TV when Circuit City in his area was going out of business. It was a display model. I miss Circuit City. There was a period of time, like, because Circuit City used to be a horrible place to go because the sales were commission driven, and either they changed the way they did business, or I just looked like somebody who wasn't going to buy anything. Because after a while, the high pressure sales stopped, and once that happened, it was a fine place to go. And then one time, I couldn't get any help at all, and I was like, okay, so we're back to this not being a good thing, I guess. And then they closed. Wasn't my fault. I would give them money. Not give them money. I would do business with them. I would just like give them, here's $5. Go buy yourself something pretty, Circuit City. I'd say. Well, Matthew, that's almost the exact opposite of what Paul was saying a minute ago, because Paul was saying pre-order, and Matthew was saying, can you imagine if Apple with future tech could do a build-to-order MacBook Pro in the back room of the Apple Store? If you're talking about the modular thing, I guess that would be possible. Oh, you're saying if they had robots to take them apart, why not have one to build them as well? But the precision. It's crazy to me. Foxconn was talking, what, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, about getting the human element out of assembly, about making it so that they could just all be, put together by robots or whatever. And they haven't been able to do that yet. I don't know if they're still trying to. You would think there would be almost something to do with like a 3D printed thing or something like that, that would be, start with elements and end with a working machine. But we'll get workable AR before we take people out of assembly, it seems. John was working as a trade show tech when Apple used to go to Comdex. John, have you watched Halt and Catch Fire? I'll wait for your answer. I'll keep reading. Eugene says Fry's claims they're not going out of business, but they're empty everywhere. They have two in Phoenix and they're empty. Hank says Fry's has been rearranging stock to hide the emptiness for years. Last time I went in looking for batteries, the shelves were bare. Best Buy got weird a few years ago. It was when there started to be the implosion at malls and people weren't going as much, There's lots more room to walk around the Best Buy. And I'm not just saying there are fewer people. Now, I say this, I haven't been to a Best Buy in 4 years. It's been, there's a TV over there that I bought at Best Buy. And that I believe is the last time I was there, honestly. But yeah, it used to be like you had to be careful because you'd bump into shelves, and that's not nearly the problem it used to be. There were Fry's around here. Stopped going because I got tired of being treated like a criminal on the way out. Cool NASA theme to the store. I don't know if it's still a thing. Frank says Circuit City had great atmosphere. My favorite club right now is Trader Joe's. I like their music, and the drinks are cheap, and there's lots of candy. Eugene says the one, yeah, that was always the fun thing about Fry's. The Phoenix one has a golf-themed Fry's and a Mayan temple-themed Fry's. John says Halt and Catch Fire didn't grab him. Okay. It's interesting to me because you talk about the Comdex thing. I was going to ask you about, I think it's the last episode of the first season, or maybe the last episode of the second season. One of the main characters is in a room where somebody has basically smuggled in a Mac. And I was curious about the whole trade show vibe from the 80s, because it looks both like wonderfully romantic and also horribly dismal. Anyway. buy open box TVs at Best Buy. I was fine with the box that I got. It was okay. Paul, on the other hand, says he's part of the elite club at Best Buy because he spends so much. I like the idea it's like a casino where they see you come in and they usher you to the back room where the good stuff is and the better candy, which they just give you free candy because you spend so much there. It's like a casino, but you definitely walk out with something. I've not had the chicken burritos from Trader Joe's, Frank. I am a huge fan of the vegetarian Thai dumplings. I'm not a vegetarian, but they're just really good. Wow, is that true, Frank? And they let them do that? Frank says you go to Best Buy after the Super Bowl because people buy a TV just for the game party and then return them to Best Buy where you have a cheap TV. I don't need another TV. But the Super Bowl was just last week. That's terrible. All right. We're at the end of the thing. I've got Tom Merritt in about 38 minutes, and I still need to turn this show around, and I should probably eat something too. So I'm going to say, have a great weekend to you guys. This was so much fun. Thank you again, everybody who, and I know some of the people who wrote in with feedback are here. Thank you very much for your feedback, and everybody, commenting here as well. It's just so much fun to hang out with you guys, truly. And thank you for doing it because, without you, it wouldn't be hanging out with you. Mine like a, what do they call those? Take care. Have a great weekend.